Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Christopher Wise with us. He's president at Wise Capital. He's a managing member at Wise and Associates. He's investing in communities and elevating lives in Louisville, Kentucky. So, Chris, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. You did it great. Yeah, I own a law firm, Wise and Associates, with offices in Louisville, Nashville right now, and I've got a property tech company, Wise Capital, where we buy Class C multifamily properties, and then we input our technology, ranging from conversational AI to property tech like locks, sensors, window film, that kind of thing, into the multifamily units that we own. Currently closing on a few right now, so still working through some interesting deals right now. But all said, I mean, things are going pretty good.
Right. And your background is as a SEAL. So you started your life as a special force soldier.
SWCC, Special Warfare Combat Crewman. So I was, I was SWCC from 2008 to 2014, got out, worked at a small registered investment advisory firm, started my law firm after that, and then kind of scaled from there.
And the SWCC layover, if we could call it that way, like how did it impacted you as a businessman? Like, what did you learn from your time there?
Yeah, it's a very disciplined community. It's still to this day, I'd argue, it's the Navy's best kept secret. Not a lot of promotions. Maybe that'll change one day. But I mean, it's a small knit community. They're all over the world doing some great work. And of course, it's just, part of NSW and has grown quite a bit. I mean, I went through in class 61. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure I think they're like 137 or something. So now I just feel like an old guy compared to where they're at today.
Right. And what does discipline mean to you? Like, what does a day in your life look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's pretty structured. It stayed that way ever since I got out. So I'm up at 4:30. There's a routine that I follow, just very personal, from meditating. I consume a ton of content when it comes to reading, any kind of project I'm working on. If we have a new product that we're trying to implement, there's some coding that happens on the background. So tons of bug fixes, that kind of stuff. And just kind of that first few hours from 4:30 to about, 7 is very much kind of my time. I've got little kids, so they're up at 7 going to school and everything else. So I get that time to plan for the day and just kind of take care of myself, and then have a jump start on the day before anybody else gets up and starts hitting me on the text message or social or anything else.
And then law, why family law, why divorce law?
Yeah. So, I got into family law mainly because the industry was so archaic, and, I was sitting back listening. Long story short is, I worked or volunteered at a domestic violence intake center, and we were helping individuals who had suffered through domestic violence and try to give them the support that they needed. And during that time, I realized that, there was a lot of things that was missing in the industry. It's very easy for the attorneys to bombard you with information. And what happens is it comes across, frankly, as if you're kind of talking down to them. And so one of the things that I wanted to implement in the beginning was, how do you really create a hospitality-like industry within the legal industry? And frankly, at this point, I believe that most industries are actually in the hospitality industry. But that's how it started. It started with, I want to grab an area where people are suffering, they're struggling. It's one of the hardest times of their lives. You don't know what to expect or what to do. The guidance is pretty rough and difficult to, fully comprehend at that time in your life and what you're going through with the stress, and help them get through it, and not just, give them the answers and push them out the door, but walk them through the actual process and where they're at and why, and the things that they want and desire and need. If it is feasible, then how they go about that strategy. And if it's not, to explain it rather than just say no and then just start billing off of it to make more money. So that's how I got started. And then through that, I started a marketing and sales agency. The concept for that was just to support the law firm. I can tell a lot of jokes about how lawyers aren't, salesmen. It's a different life, different mindset. But that was the concept, and from there it scaled. I exited up from that, and then that's where I really got my conversational AI and a lot of the other technology kind of experience when it comes from SEO, SEM, all of these things, and coding, Python, C++. And then I repurposed that knowledge base, honestly, into the property tech world. And same concept. I mean, we're walking into these apartments that are C-class apartments, and people are thinking, oh, C-class, it's, bad tenants, bad location, high deferred maintenance. None of it's true. The designator really just comes from when the property was built. So states are a little bit different, but universally you can say it's about 1976 on average. And that's what it is. They're just old properties. It doesn't have anything to do with location or tenants or occupancy. It's just about when it was built, and then you can implement strategies to update those, and that's what we're doing. It's a social impact kind of movement where we're trying to build these communities instead of just cycling through tenants and raising rent. And that's historically kind of what that class has been treated like.
Interesting. And to double click on the law stuff, doesn't it affect you to see like all these stories, or even domestic violence? How do you keep your shit together in these cases?
Yeah, you got to be somewhat removed from it, right? I mean, it's not that you don't care, because you have to care to want to do this, or else you just don't do it long term. But it doesn't help any of the clients if the attorney is falling apart, or struggling to get through any kind of conversation, or even a hearing motion in front of a judge, whatever it may be. So you have to have your head about you, and that comes with a lot of strategy, a lot of planning. There's no just walking into court and winging it. There's a lot of things that happen in the background to get you ready for it. But yeah, there's some horrible people out there. There's some horrible things that have happened, and someone's got to get up there and represent those individuals and be the voice that sometimes they struggle to find at that time. And that's where I frankly got my start.
And do you feel that these persons that are victims of domestic violence, do you feel that the system is setting them up for justice? Is there a deeper cause, deeper root to that? And could the system be improved?
The system could absolutely be improved. I've been well known for not being a fan of the system, that's for sure. The reality is, it's not the best justice system. It's the one that we have. And so there's a process and for lack of better words, kind of a system that we have to follow in order to get, what some may think is justice and others may not. And that's really the struggle, right? Like, no one ever goes into family court and leaves feeling like they won. And that's the reality of that kind of subsect of law is, at the end of the day, you're dealing with, your most prized possession, if you want to call it that, which is your family, your children. And if you don't have any kids, then it's your life that you're dealing with. And so nothing is easy about it. There is no nominal, value that you can put out there to say, once you hit this, then everybody feels like they win. That's just not how it is. And that's how that area of law works. So it's really about identifying what winning means to that individual, and it's different for everybody. And then managing expectations to make sure that you can achieve that, if it's even achievable. And if it's not, you got to spend the time to walk through, what that individual should expect and why, and then go from there. And, we're doing the same stuff in property tech is, us implementing technology and building out locks and sensors and all this stuff is great, but it started because, if I buy a C-class multifamily property and try to implement $1,200 locks, it's not going to work. It just doesn't work that way with the Class C space. The money's not there for that. And so it's managing, expenses, and it's looking at, if we create our own lock, what does that really cost, what goes into that. And you find out that, you can really mass produce these between $17 and $40, depending on the quantity amount. And, that's the start of it. And then it's going back very similarly to the law firm, where you're managing expectations and you're saying, okay, it's not about just raising rents. It's very much looking into the expenses and seeing, where is all this going and why. I'm shocked the amount of conversations I have. Nobody knows why. They don't know why they're paying 17% management fees. They always thought it was 3 or something. And so you got to walk through it with people. And we build systems and technology to overcome that and to improve everything. And it's very much about community building, not just here's some cool tech, now figure out how an app works, but bring in ice cream trucks and, be out there with the tenants and figure out what is going on. What problems are you having that I don't know? And I thought it was great, but actually it's not working, and you got to be present. And so that's very much what we're doing. And it's kind of an easy transition because it's the same base concept of hospitality from the law firm over to the property tech company.
Yeah, ice cream trucks for the win. They're so underrated. I had a couple of ice cream trucks apps entrepreneurs on this podcast. They're so underrated. Like these little things that you can do for your clients to bring joy. It's pretty easy nowadays with all the technology we have. Just one last question on the law. When is divorce the right option, and can both party win in a divorce case? Because most of the time it benefits one and the other party is like left destroyed.
Yeah, and you're hitting on the topic that is, no one feels like they won, right? I mean, even the people who, from a paper standpoint, you might believe won, they feel like they didn't get everything they should have, so to answer your question, when is divorce right? I think that's a personal question. I think that is very much to do with that particular person, their family, their kids, that kind of thing. To come up with all the scenarios is probably impossible, frankly. But I think you just, you kind of know. And that has so much to do. Everyone's different when it comes from an emotional standpoint, education, you can just keep going. And so it's going to depend on that circumstance and that person's belief. And that's something that you typically can't, overcome. I'm not going to convince somebody that what they were taught their entire life is wrong. That's just not a thing I'm going to be able to do. But what I can do is, if that time comes and this is the situation you find yourself in, then I can walk you through the steps and process and explain what we expect and why. And that, the fear of the unknown is really what we're trying to reduce as much as possible. And then as far as, what you said, when's it right? And then what was the other question?
Yeah, the other party winning, both party winnings, but it's fascinating because a marriage is legal, right, from the government perspective, but for individuals, very much a psychological thing, right? So like when people break up and want a divorce, is like, yeah, just psychologically, just so we're clear, we're not together anymore. This is over, right? Like, and we're turning the page. But for the government, it is really much a legal event. It's like managing their population, taxes, right, and all of that. So, yeah, just want to highlight that as part of the question.
Yeah. So, when you enter into a marriage, that's based on a lot of emotions, love and caring and how you got there in the first place. And that's very much an emotional, train ride that got you there. When you go through a divorce, you are now in a business transaction. And that's really the complicated factor, is you're taking all those emotions that could have been built over years, decades, depending on the situation, and you're then deducing it to a business transaction. And that's where a lot of people struggle. I still don't think that there's, quote unquote, a winner or a loser in these cases. Mainly because you're always going to give up something, right? If you have kids, you're not going to have them 24/7. Now, there's incidences and situations, of course, that warrant that, and that happens. But, if you're just talking generically speaking, it's not like, hey, there's no problem with, domestic violence or substance abuse or anything like that, but I'd never want to see them again, never want them to see the kids again. That's not really realistic in those kind of situations. And so you got to sit down and have those talks and manage
That's
the
not thinking of
expectations.
your children's, right? Like, except if
Yeah.
your partner is dangerous, right? Like
Yeah.
making a decision for your kids not to see their parents is pretty much terrible parenting, in my opinion. And that happens most of the time. Well, not most of the time, but would you say like 50% of divorces is like sour?
No, it's interesting. I think that, the perfect divorce, if you're going to talk about the perfect divorce, what you're talking about is typically an uncontested divorce. Some states call it dissolutions. There's some different names for it depending on where you're at. And really what you're saying is you're coming together as a unit, and you're writing out and designing what the future is going to look like until the kids are adults. And, those are typically your, like quote unquote best divorces, because yes, there's animosity. Yes, there's a lot of problems, but they're able to sit down and actually think through this logically versus just screaming at each other or trying to get some kind of edge on the other person. Those are your typical, the quote unquote, the easiest cases, if you will, just because, hey, we can kind of negotiate this and no one's going to have hurt feelings or jump across the table or anything like that. If it doesn't work, we can take a step back and then take some time to try to figure it out. Those tend to be, kind of streamlined cases where it's best for everybody. And I've got a million stories on some crazy outcomes that, I would not think would ever work, but they made it work because they put the kids first. And that's great when you get that kind of outcome. But, I don't think it's, 50% as far as contested. There's probably different levels of contested if you really want to think about it, in the sense of you might be arguing about a 401k, but you might be perfectly aligned on how you handle the children. Right. And so again, this goes back to that kind of business transaction where, there's different kind of levels of contested cases, and and some people, that's what they really care about. And so they may feel like they lost, but, they have 50-50 parenting time and custody but, they got $10,000 less than the other person. So that's what really upsets them. And that's, really what I'm getting at when I say there's not really a winner in these cases. And the rare ones that feel that way, they typically have spent a lot of time walking through this. Sometimes they go through therapy, and that's how they ended up in front of us. And just all these scenarios are so different that it really just depends on that family unit, right? And those individuals a part of that, and how they handle stress and complexities in these type of cases.
And what happens to the main property after the divorce? Who usually keeps it? Is it the man? Is it the woman? And then what happens to the other partner? Do they move like as far away as possible, or do they usually stick around in some radius?
Yeah, so it's really dependent on a lot of different factors. I mean, I'll tell you that in Kentucky, the starting point is, equal parenting time and joint custody. That's the starting point. And so typically if you got to find some domestic violence or substance abuse or some kind of factor that would play a role in modifying that. Other times there's none of that, and it's a work schedule. You have somebody who works the third shift at UPS, and it's from midnight to 6 a.m. or something like that. And it just doesn't make logical sense to have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old in a house with nobody there at 2 a.m, and it's not that they're a bad parent or anything's wrong with their lifestyle. It's just, that's the job they have. And so it really just depends so much on the case and the particulars of that family and that person, that it's really tough to say, women, there was that old ideology of like the woman gets everything, the guy gets nothing, he gets screwed over, he doesn't get to see his kids, and it's all the system's fault. We've gone a very long ways. Family court, at least in Kentucky, wasn't really a thing until the 90s. And so, we've come a very long way from that. And the state laws, and Tennessee is similar in that sense. And, it's very much, how do we come up with a plan where we're keeping the family unit together, maybe not the individuals, maybe not the parents, but as far as the unit itself, that they're still intact. The kids are seeing the parents, holidays are working out the way that they see fit for their family. But yeah, there's definitely some situations where it's different because of some extenuating circumstance, whether it be, drinking or drugs or whatever, that definitely play an effect. But I've seen it on both sides. I mean, I've seen women lose their children because they can't stop, taking certain kind of drugs. And I've seen men lose their children because they refuse to stay in the state. And most states aren't going to require the kids to transfer schools every other year from here to Wisconsin. It's not realistic. So it really just depends on that circumstance. And then what do people care about? How do they want to handle this? Because I can't make them care about their children. That's not in my wheelhouse of capabilities. If I could figure that out, that might change the world. But I'm not too sure of anyone who can dive in and change people's beliefs like that.
Right. Because in the end, you're building communities, right? And we're seeing, I'm not sure if this is actually beneficial for the economy. Probably not, right? Because the kids are most of the time destroyed by that. And if you are raising a destroyed kid and throwing them in the economy, well, I mean, not most of the time, sometimes, right? Like they're not brought up the right way. And that kid is thrown in the economy after that. And usually I'm not sure if that's actually positive, but first, do you agree with that? And second, why are divorce rates increasing in this society? And what can we do to actually prevent that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because your right way of parenting or leading your life and my right way and my neighbor's right way and all these things, they're very rarely going to all align, right? I mean, we all have different upbringings, we all have different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so because of it, the first 7 years typically from the studies is where you kind of get your understanding of the world, that first impression of the world. What is money? Are rich people bad people? Like all these different thoughts and ideologies. That's really the largest impact is that time frame. And so again, I mean, yours, mine, anyone else that we grab, it's always going to be different, at least a little bit. I mean, sometimes very much different. I grew up, in a great household and we're fortunate enough to have many things. And so because of it, it's tough for me to fully comprehend and understand someone who might have grown up, in poverty and maybe never had a home or something like that. And so because of it, we have different views of the world. And so, trying to connect those dots and make sense of it is, like I said, probably outside of my wheelhouse and outside of most of the wheelhouses of most people. But, when I think of, why are divorce rates going up, there's not a lot of truth in it. I mean, typically the states are a little bit different. It's almost, I haven't looked at this in a while, but a couple of years ago, I remember reading that, California, when individuals were getting divorced in California, it was like 30% of them hired an attorney. Texas had something similar where the hiring of a divorce attorney was really low. And they've created systems to help, guide individuals because the cost of these attorneys are so high to essentially do it yourself. I know when I got started, that was the first thing I did is I literally, recorded videos, posted them everywhere, still on YouTube, where I walked through the entire process, where you go, what you ask for, what documents you get, how you fill them out, where do you return them, what costs are you looking at? And the idea behind it was that, you shouldn't have this secret, society where everybody, the trick of the trade of just filing paperwork has to be hidden from everybody. Now, I don't think lawyers are going anywhere. I don't think the industry is going anywhere because you do have these complex families and you have these complex situations that are further advanced than a just typical, hey, I want to get a divorce. You take your stuff, I take my stuff. We have no kids. We're out of here. That's very easy. But, once you start getting different financial institutions involved, maybe 401k or pensions, or even military, that kind of stuff. It hits a level that just checking a box is not the right way to do it. You got to get some help, and so I think the divorce rate, and again, it's been a while since I've looked at the number, but typically it sits somewhere around the 60% mark. And it changes, it's like 5, 8, 10 plus years where it kind of shifts. And we're currently getting this interesting dynamic from all these research facilities that are saying that the divorce rate for individuals in their 60s and older is actually increasing quite a bit. And a lot of that has to do with taxes, Social Security, and it's not so much that they don't like each other or love each other or can deal with each other. It becomes a financial situation, and they get more money, in their opinion, based on what the industry is now calling gray divorce, and it's been around for a while. But the numbers are rising, and so it's not always that it's bad, right? It becomes a business transaction where you're going, look, the kids are growing up, we don't hate each other, but we didn't save enough, and we found out that if we do this, then Social Security pays this out. And they've looked at it and comprehended it from a financial standpoint, frankly. And, it's interesting to see those kind of cases because there's no animosity. They just need to check the box. And we also have cases where they separated for the last 30 years and they don't even know where the other person is. They haven't seen them in 30 years. And, they just need to get this done because they heard, they read something somewhere and now they're scared and they just want to get it over with. And so, like I said, it's so dependent on the situation itself that it's tough to kind of armchair quarterback it.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Chris. Where can people find out more about you and your company?
Yeah. So Wise & Associates is, on website, wiseafl.com. Obviously we got LinkedIn. For us specifically, or me specifically in the property tech side, same thing. We're on LinkedIn, Google, all the things. And so it's fairly easy to find us.
All right. Well, that was Chris and Charles.